I'd been running safety protocols at the refinery for nearly 9 years when Davis showed up with his shiny MBA and decided my department needed disruption. First thing he did was tear apart our standard incident response plans, said they were fear based and clunky. He laughed at the section I wrote on third party containment liability like it was a prank, said it was overkill, and called it worst case fantasy writing. Davis didn't even bother hiding his attitude, strutted into our safety ops room like he was staging a TED talk, tossing around terms like agile safety culture and leaner intervention matrices. My team just nodded and smiled while I quietly backed up the full protocol binder on two external drives and saved the digital files under a nondescript folder name. That week, Davis sent out his streamlined emergency protocols with zero redundancy, no third-party accountability layers, and no supplier incident triggers, just bullet points and corporate cheerleading. Davis ran the next safety meeting like a sales pitch. His voice was smooth, like he'd practiced in front of a mirror, clicking through a stripped-down PowerPoint version of our response plan and deleting sections in real time, mine included. One by one, he wiped out our chemical leak triage route, emergency contractor override permissions, and the risk tier escalation rules that had taken years to build. I kept my mic and camera off during the Zoom, watching him cut through policy like a man who'd never cleaned up an ammonia spill. Maybe he thought the slides were all theoretical, like something out of a textbook. But those policies, they were born from real-world mistakes, years of near misses, and sleepless nights making sure we didn't end up in the news for the wrong reasons. The execs on the call actually applauded him, nodding like he was the next great visionary. Clearing the clutter, they said, pushing for real change. Like they understood the difference between streamlining and cutting your own safety net. I sat there, quiet. There was no point in arguing. I'd seen women in this company get reassigned into dead-end compliance roles for less. Hell, I'd seen good men get sidelined over a single sharp remark. After the meeting, I saved the recorded video, every email thread, time-stamped versions of the original policy. I stored all of it on a drive hidden behind a wall panel under my desk. It wasn't paranoia, it was practice. My team had seen the direction this was headed long before the first slide was deleted. I didn't speak up, I didn't argue. Public confrontation wasn't the move. Not when your head's on the chopping block already. I learned that the hard way years ago. No one cared about my experience, my record, or what I had to say. They were all looking at the future, and the future had a shiny new MBA attached to it. So I let Davis have his moment. He'd earned it after all. But when everything came crashing down, and I knew it would, I'd be ready. It happened on a Monday. The supply tanker scheduled to bring in our coolant solution never showed. By noon, the plant stalled, machinery idled, pressure levels spiked. The safety board lit up yellow, flashing warnings at us. The new vendor had ghosted us entirely. No call, no email, no explanation. We had zero leverage, no penalties in the contract, no fallback plan, no out-of-state arbitration clause. Messages started pouring in. Didn't we used to have a protocol for this? Isn't there a supplier failsafe in the old doc? I didn't respond. Not right away. Davis was still high on his minimalism mantra. He probably thought this was just another efficiency test, like we could tighten the screws until everything ran smoother. But I wasn't about to stick my neck out while everyone else scrambled to find someone to blame. Not when Davis was still riding high on his new changes. By mid-afternoon, he was pacing through operations, yelling about accountability, pointing fingers like a man who hadn't just spent the last 3 months gutting our entire response framework. He was in the control room now, red-faced, barking at anyone who made eye contact. "This is a failure of leadership," he shouted, ignoring the fact that he'd removed the very protocols that could have prevented this. I watched him from the corner of the ops room, leaning against a wall, arms crossed. He was acting like this was all some unforeseen disaster, a storm nobody could have predicted, as if a tanker simply not showing up was the problem, not the fact that we had no contingency plans left to handle it. A junior analyst turned to me, looking frantic. "Isn't this supposed to be in the plan?" I nodded, but I didn't say anything. My team was still reeling from what we'd lost when Davis sliced through the old protocols. People were trying to piece things together with what we had left, but without that backup framework, it was like building a house with no foundation. I could see the panic in their eyes, but I didn't join the chorus of complaints. There was no point in it. Not yet. I knew what would come next. Davis stormed over, voice rising. "This is negligence. I want a full report now. Why wasn't this vendor confirmed? Why isn't there a backup vendor? This is a failure of everyone. He was already turning the screws on procurement, but I knew the truth. There was no backup because Davis had cut that too. There was no supplier failsafe in his version of the protocol, no escalation clauses, no room for error, just bullet points. But I wasn't going to throw that in his face, not here, not yet. Instead, I just stood there, calm, watching as the plant started to feel more like a ticking bomb with every minute. I pulled up the old version of the protocol in my head, not on my screen. I'd already archived that, all the layers that should have been there, the fail-safes that had been removed. I could almost hear the hum of the machinery in my memory, the way the system would have reacted differently with those protections in place. Davis kept pacing, spitting out directives, blaming anyone he could. But I knew the truth. It wasn't the team's fault. It wasn't procurement's fault. It was his shiny new changes. It wasn't the first time someone like him had come through, trying to reinvent the wheel without understanding the road it had to travel. I could feel the familiar weight of it, but I kept my mouth shut. I had my backups. I had my files. I had the proof that would come when everything came crashing down. Procurement was the first to get thrown under the bus. Davis pointed his finger at them, accusing them of failing to confirm the vendor's readiness. The usual routine: make someone else the scapegoat. But I could feel the room shifting, the tension building. A junior analyst, the kind who still had that eager, naive look about him, pulled up the final signed protocol on his screen. Wait, he said, raising his hand like he wasn't sure if he should be asking this. Why doesn't this include breach escalation? Silence hit the room like a dropped wrench. No one moved, not even Davis. His face went a shade of red that I wasn't sure was even human. He tried to recover quickly, but it was obvious. That question had hit a nerve. He sputtered for a moment, then tried to pivot. Well, obviously, this wasn't a breach. We're talking about an operational hiccup. But it was too late. The seed had been planted. The old protocol had escalation steps. Davis's new one didn't. No breach, no escalation, no protections. He shuffled his papers, trying to maintain control, but the damage was done. His edits, his changes, had been exposed in a single, innocent question. The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Finally, legal spoke up, her voice low and careful. Do we have recourse? I glanced around the room, feeling the weight of all eyes on me. They were hoping for some kind of lifeline, something that would give them a way out. But I knew better. I shook my head. Not under that version. She didn't say anything, just nodded and made a note on her pad. I could feel her already calculating her next move. Davis, meanwhile, was still trying to get back on track. He shot a look at me, clearly sensing the moment was slipping away from him. But he didn't say anything directly, just kept rattling off instructions, trying to keep the panic contained. I kept my mouth shut. There was no need to add anything. He was already digging a hole deeper than he knew. When the meeting wrapped up, I closed my laptop, making sure to log the incident in my private record. Every missing clause, every safety layer deleted by Davis. It was all right there, the proof in the omissions. I wasn't worried about it yet. The real fallout hadn't even started. Not yet. That evening, I went home, reheated dinner, and sat in front of the TV. But my mind was elsewhere. The real consequences would come. I knew it. It was only a matter of time. Thursday morning started with a subject line that read, Immediate legal review. Incident exposure. We were getting sued. The supplier's legal team claimed we'd violated contract terms by canceling future orders without proper arbitration. They had emails, logs, and, worst of all, the final signed document. Davis's edited, stripped version, with vague cooperation language and no real protections. The email was forwarded to the legal team, and within an hour, we were all in a conference room. They'd pulled up the contract, the supplier's demands, and every single email trail leading back to that moment. Legal kept flipping through the pages, landing on page 9, where all the soft language had been inserted. Every passive clause read out loud like obituaries. Here, one of the attorneys said, this clause, it's practically meaningless. Someone finally said my name. Does the old version have stronger safeguards? The entire room turned, all eyes on me. The tension was thick. I felt the weight of it, but I didn't flinch. I didn't need to look for the files. I already knew where they were. Without a word, I pulled up my email. Attached the original draft with the track changes visible. Subject line, June 2nd policy, full version. Hit send. The room was still for a moment, everyone digesting what just happened. I could hear the clicks of keyboards as people opened the file, saw the original clauses, the ones that Davis had deleted, staring back at them. They were quiet for a few beats. It wasn't a surprise, not to me, but to them, to the ones who thought they could gloss over the details and throw out a few buzzwords. It had to sting. The head attorney read through the changes, his voice low and controlled, but I could tell he was pissed. Here, we see a breach escalation clause. He glanced up at Davis, who shifted in his seat, looking uncomfortable for the first time. And here, third-party indemnification, specifically spelled out. All of it's gone. Davis didn't say anything. He couldn't. He was exposed. The room was still processing, but it was clear who had made the decisions and who had to answer for them now. The attorney looked at me again. "Do you have any other documentation?" I shook my head. "Just what I've sent." Someone else in the room muttered, "That's a big problem." The weight of the moment settled in. The path was clear now. Davis had led us into this mess, but the company couldn't avoid it anymore. This was bigger than a simple screw-up. This was a legal and financial nightmare. I stood up without saying another word. I knew what was coming. It wasn't a matter of if we'd pay for this, but how much. The meeting dragged on for hours, but I wasn't really there. I'd already made my move. I knew what needed to happen, and now it was just a matter of watching how this all played out. How they would point fingers, how they would try to clean up the mess. But I had what I needed. The real fallout was here, and I'd been waiting for it. A week later, I got the deposition notice. Outside counsel had entered my version of the protocol as Exhibit A. I walked into that freezing conference room like I'd been carrying this moment in my back pocket. The room was sterile. White walls, metal chairs, the faint buzz of the overhead lights. The kind of place where you could feel your spine stiffen just from walking in. But it didn't matter. I'd already won. They just didn't know it yet. They asked if I wrote the original document. I said, yes. Simple. No hesitation. Then they started reading the deleted clauses aloud. First, the penalty triggers, then the escalation rules, the third-party indemnification. Each one of them felt like a nail in Davis's coffin. They were just words on paper to him. But to me, to anyone who worked in this industry, those clauses were the difference between a small mishap and an absolute disaster. When they finished, they looked up at me. "Who deleted these?" I didn't even flinch. No emotion, just the facts. "That'd be Davis." I slid a USB drive across the table, letting it clink against the wood. It felt like the weight of the whole thing shifted in that moment. "Here," I said, the video of the meeting. They plugged it into the laptop, and I watched as the screen flickered to life. There he was, full screen, sitting at the head of the table, clicking through the protocol, deleting each clause while he monologued about modernization and streamlining the plan. His voice was still there, the confident tone, the rhetoric about how the old protocol was outdated, how it was holding the company back. I could practically hear his smug little chuckle as he wiped the protections away. His pen tapping stopped in the video when he saw the USB slide across the table. I knew he'd be watching this too. I had no doubt he'd seen it before. He just wasn't ready for it to be in front of everyone. His voice didn't come back after that. There was a moment of absolute silence in the room, the kind of silence that feels like it's dragging its feet, pulling everything to a halt. The attorneys on the other side just stared at the screen, stunned. I didn't need to say anything else. The video spoke for itself. The lead attorney cleared his throat first, glancing at the others. "Well, that's pretty damning." It wasn't a question, just an acknowledgement of the reality. I sat back in my chair, watching the video play on. He could have been the one to cut this mess off at any point, but he didn't. And now, the proof was right there. I wasn't going to rub it in. I didn't need to. The room had already started to shift. There were no more questions about who was responsible. There was only the silence. The uncomfortable silence that stretched between the lines of the video, between the clicks of the mouse and the tapping of the keyboards as they started pulling up the rest of the evidence. I leaned back in my seat, let the moment play out. It was all over now. Davis was already finished. I didn't need to do any more to finish the job. I'd built the bunker, and when it collapsed, all I had to do was point. The hearing was tense. The plaintiff's lawyer held up my original draft like it was sacred, the weight of the paper heavy in the air. He read out the changelog, every red line, every deletion. It wasn't even dramatic, just brutal. The way he read through the list of clauses that Davis had erased, no flourish, no emotion, just the cold, hard facts. It was like watching a hammer fall on glass. I could see Davis squirming in his seat, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, trying to keep himself composed. But his confidence was gone. It had drained from him the second the lawyer had pulled up that document. The judge sat back in her chair, flipping through the papers, clearly unimpressed. Her gaze flicked over to Davis like he'd done something far worse than just mess up a protocol. "These were removed by you?" she asked, her voice flat but pointed. Davis didn't even hesitate, but I could tell it was rehearsed. "Well, it was a team decision. We we streamlined the document based on input from several departments." The judge raised an eyebrow, clearly not buying it. "So you're telling me the decision to remove critical escalation clauses and third-party indemnification was a team decision?" Davis opened his mouth to speak, but she didn't wait for him to answer. She turned to the attorney. "And the metadata on the edits?" The lawyer nodded, pulling up the records on his tablet. "All of the edits came from Mr. Davis's login, Your Honor." He looked over at Davis, but the statement had already hung in the air. The judge didn't miss a beat. She looked back at Davis. "So, just to be clear, these were your decisions, alone." Davis fumbled for words, but his credibility was already shot. The room had turned against him, and he knew it. Then came the kicker. The judge's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Mr. Davis, will you still be representing the company?" The silence in the room was suffocating. Davis's face flushed. His eyes darted toward the CEO sitting in the back, then to the board members who'd been present. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The judge waited, staring him down, waiting for an answer that would never come. Finally, the CEO stood. He didn't look at Davis, didn't even acknowledge him, just muttered, "We're reassessing." His words hung in the air, heavy with finality. The message was clear. Davis was done. I didn't gloat. There was no need to. The courtroom was already full of a different kind of noise now. The noise of defeat, the sound of a man whose mistakes had been laid bare in front of everyone who mattered. The judge's gaze lingered on Davis for a moment longer, like she was letting him feel the weight of her disapproval. It was like watching a man trying to hold up a crumbling building. It wasn't just about the missing clauses anymore. It was about the arrogance of thinking you could get away with this kind of failure without anyone noticing. I didn't look at Davis. I didn't have to. The silence in the room was louder than any applause. 2 days later, we got the staff update. Davis is pursuing new opportunities. Translation, fired. The email was a clean corporate move. No frills, just business as usual. I didn't need the formalities. His office was cleared out like a crime scene, nameplate gone, glass wiped clean, even the faintest traces of him erased. A ghost of the man who thought he could tear down everything that had been built before him. It was almost impressive how quickly they'd scrubbed him from the place. That afternoon, I found an envelope on my desk, a plain, unmarked envelope, a little too thick for just a piece of paper. Inside was a bonus check with a note, "For your foresight and diligence." I didn't show it to anyone, didn't even mention it. I just tucked the check into my drawer like a secret reward, a small token for not screaming when I wanted to, for keeping quiet when it would have been easier to tear him down earlier, for staying calm when I'd had every reason to lash out. The rest of the week was quieter. People started treating me differently, though. They weren't outright rude, but there was a caution in their eyes now. Respect, but also wariness. They saw the way I moved in the world now, the way I didn't back down when it counted. I felt it in every glance, every sideways look, the unsaid things hanging in the air. One afternoon, I found a sticky note on my monitor. "Remind me never to cross you." I didn't laugh, didn't even smile. I just picked it up, folded it neatly, and tucked it into my drawer beside the check. Made a damn good bookmark. Every time I opened my planner, I'd see it. A reminder that people knew now. They knew what I was capable of when the stakes were high. And maybe it was a warning. Or maybe just a mark of respect. Either way, it was a reminder of who I was now, who I'd become in this place. Someone who'd built their own bunker, and when it collapsed, all I had to do was point. Thursday night, I was at the bar with my best friend Julie. She'd once left a resignation letter in a boss's lunchbox just for kicks. We were halfway through happy hour when my phone buzzed. LinkedIn. I glanced down. The message was from the safety director at Thermatech, our biggest competitor. "Brilliant work. We should talk hazard pay." Julie leaned over, saw the name, and grinned. "Is that who I think it is?" I raised my glass, took a slow sip. "To contingency plans and backup files." She laughed, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. She knew exactly what it meant. I didn't respond right away. Not because I was worried about the offer. That part was easy. It was more the weight of it. The fact that someone, anyone, was willing to see me as more than just a cog in the machine. A recognition that felt both overdue and out of place. Julie raised her own glass. "You've earned it," she said. I didn't need to argue. Instead, I let the moment settle. The job offer was tempting, sure, but I knew the game by now. It wasn't about finding the next move. It was about how you played it, how you made them see you, how you waited until the right moment to act. Later that night, after a few more rounds, I pulled up the court ruling again. The digital copy, my name drew clean, center, unedited, listed on the winning draft. The words were just words on a page, but they still hit different. Proof that I'd done what I set out to do, no gratitude required. I didn't smile, didn't feel the need to. I just closed the file, leaned back in my chair, and exhaled. I'd never needed a thank you. I'd built the bunker, and when it collapsed, all I had to do was point.